The lake was the heart of my world. It wasn't much to look at on a map, just a small, kidney-shaped body of water tucked behind my house, fringed with cattails and shaded by a few scraggly willows. But to me, it was everything. I'd grown up on its banks, skipping stones with my dad until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water gold. I'd proposed to Sarah there, down on one knee in the mud, her laugh echoing across the ripples when I nearly dropped the ring. Our kids, Emma and Jack, learned to fish there, their small hands clutching poles too big for them, giggling as they reeled in sunfish no bigger than my palm. That lake wasn't just water. It was memory, woven into every inch of my life. But the HOA had other plans. They called it community enhancement. I called it theft. It started small new signs posted along the shore, declaring the lake a shared resource. Then came the surveys, men in khakis with clipboards and laser pointers, mapping out my backyard like it was theirs to carve up. The HOA claimed the lake was on community land, that my deed didn't cover the water itself, just the house and a sliver of shore. They wanted to turn it into a recreational hub, think paddle boats, a clubhouse, maybe even condos. They said it would raise property values. I didn't care about property values. I cared about my kids growing up with the same lake I did. I fought them at first. I showed up to every HOA meeting, clutching my dog-eared deed, arguing until my voice cracked. I hired a lawyer, a guy named Carl who smelled like cheap cologne and promised he'd seen cases like this before. But the HOA had deeper pockets and sharper lawyers. Every meeting ended the same. Polite smiles, vague promises, and another piece of my lake slipping away. They put up a chain-link fence along the shore, cutting off half my access. Then they drained part of the lake to test water quality, leaving a muddy scar where my kids used to wade. I felt like I was drowning, watching something I loved die inch by inch, powerless to stop it. Sarah saw it eating me up. "Tom, you can't keep fighting this alone," she'd say, her hand on my shoulder as I stared out the kitchen window at the lake, now half hidden behind their damn fence. But I didn't know how to stop. I couldn't just let it go. Emma stopped asking to fish. Jack stopped running to the shore after school. The lake was still there, but it wasn't ours anymore. It was theirs, and I was losing. One night, after another useless HOA meeting, I sat on the back porch with a beer, staring at the water. The moon hung low, turning the lake into a sheet of silver. I was done. Defeated. I'd already lost half the shore, and they were planning to dredge the rest for their precious clubhouse. But as I sat there, something caught my eye, a faint ripple near the far bank, where the willows dipped into the water. It wasn't a fish. It was too steady, too mechanical. I grabbed a flashlight and trudged down to the shore, ignoring the no trespassing sign the HOA had planted. The beam caught a glint of metal just below the surface. I waded in, the cold biting my shins, and there it was, a rusted pipe, barely visible, running along the lake bed. It wasn't big, maybe 6 inches across, but it stretched out of sight, disappearing into the murky depths. I'd never seen it before, not in 30 years of living here. My heart thudded. This wasn't just a pipe. It was something the HOA hadn't mentioned, something they'd missed. The next morning, I was at the county records office before it opened, my boots still damp from the lake. The clerk, a bored woman with a perm, handed me a stack of yellowed maps and deeds after I begged for anything tied to my property. I spread them out on a table, my hands shaking as I traced the lake's outline. There it was, in faded ink. Utility easement, 1962. Submerged pipeline, Municipal Water Authority. The pipe wasn't just some forgotten relic. It was a city water line, running right through my lake, with legal protections that predated the HOA by decades. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in months, hope. I called Carl, my lawyer, and told him what I'd found. He was skeptical at first, muttering about statutes and easements, but when I faxed him the map, his tone changed. "Tom, this could be big," he said. "If that pipeline's active, the HOA can't touch the lake without city approval. And if they knew about it and didn't disclose it, they're in deep shit." I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing the HOA's smug faces, their clipboards, their fences. They thought they'd won. They thought I was done. I started digging. Literally. I borrowed a kayak from my neighbor, Pete, and paddled out to map the pipeline's path. It ran the length of the lake, buried just deep enough to stay hidden unless you knew where to look. I called the city's water authority, pretending to be a concerned homeowner asking about infrastructure. The guy on the phone confirmed it. The pipeline was still active, carrying water to half the county. Any development near it required environmental permits, impact studies, the works. The HOA hadn't mentioned a word about it in their plans. I started to wonder, did they know? Had they seen the pipeline and buried it in their paperwork, hoping no one would notice? Or were they just sloppy, too arrogant to check the records? Either way, I had them. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I tracked down old utility reports, took photos of the pipe from every angle, and even got a statement from a retired surveyor who'd worked on the lake in the 70s. He remembered the pipeline, said it was a pain in the ass to install because of wetland protections. Wetland protections. That was the kicker. The lake wasn't just minite, it was a protected ecosystem, and the pipeline tied it to regulations the HOA couldn't ignore. Sarah was skeptical when I told her my plan. "Tom, you're obsessing," she said, watching me spread maps across the dining room table. "What if they just bulldoze through it? They've got money, lawyers, everything." But I couldn't stop. This wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about proving they couldn't walk all over us, that we weren't just some nobody family they could steamroll. Emma overheard us one night and asked, "Dad, are we getting the lake back?" I looked at her, her wide eyes so much like Sarah's, and said, "I'm trying, kid." The HOA's next meeting was a circus. They'd rented out the community center, decked it out with posters of their Lakeview Commons, project artist renderings of paddle boats, and a shiny clubhouse, like something out of a real estate brochure. The room was packed. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years, developers in suits, even a local news crew sniffing out a story. I sat in the back, my folder of evidence tucked under my arm, my heart pounding like a drum. When they opened the floor for comments, I stood up. The HOA president, a guy named Richard with a fake tan and a fake smile, nodded at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Tom, we've heard your concerns before," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This project benefits everyone." I didn't respond. I just walked to the front, plugged my laptop into their projector, and pulled up the first slide. A grainy photo of the pipeline, glinting under the lake's surface. The room went quiet. I laid it out, piece by piece. The pipeline's history, the easement from 1962, the wetland protections, the environmental regulations. I showed them the city's records, the surveyor's statement, the water authority's confirmation that any development would need years of permits they didn't have. Richard's smile faltered. The developers shifted in their seats. I saved the best for last, an email I'd dug up from the HOA's own files, obtained through a public records request. It was from their surveyor, dated 6 months ago, warning them about potential utility conflicts in the lake. They'd known about the pipeline. They'd buried it, thinking I'd never find out. The room erupted. Neighbors shouted questions. The news crew's camera swung toward Richard, who was stammering about miscommunications. I didn't let up. "You lied," I said, my voice steady. "You knew this lake was protected, and you tried to steal it anyway." Someone in the back clapped. Then another. By the time I sat down, half the room was on their feet, demanding answers. The fallout was swift. The HOA's project stalled as the city launched an investigation. The pipeline's protections meant their clubhouse was dead in the water, pun intended. Environmental groups got involved, sniffing out violations in the HOA's plans. The news crew ran a story, and suddenly our little lake was a local cause, with neighbors I barely knew showing up to help tear down the HOA's fence. Richard resigned a week later, citing personal reasons. I heard he sold his house and left town. The lake was mine again. Well, not just mine, the city reclassified it as a protected wetland, which meant no one could touch it, not even me. But that was fine. I didn't need to own it. I just needed it to stay the way it was. Wild, quiet, ours. The first day the fence came down, Emma and Jack ran to the shore, their fishing poles dragging in the grass. Sarah stood beside me, her hand in mine, watching the sun set over the water. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "We did it." But the fight wasn't clean. The HOA's lawyers tried to spin it, claiming they'd acted in good faith. Some neighbors sided with them, saying the lake project would have been good for the community. I heard whispers that I'd gone too far, that I'd embarrassed the HOA unnecessarily. Maybe I had, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Standing on the shore now, watching the ripples spread from a fish breaking the surface, I can't help but wonder what else they're hiding. The pipeline saved us this time, but what about the next? What other secrets are buried out there, waiting for someone to dig them up? I don't know. But I do know this. They underestimated me. And they'll never do that again. So what do you think? Was I right to take on the HOA? Or did I stir up trouble that could have been avoided? Should I have let the lake go for the sake of peace? Or was fighting worth it, no matter the cost? And what about you? Have you ever faced a giant like that, something bigger than you, and found a way to win? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if you felt the fight in this story, and subscribe for more tales of standing up to the odds. Let's keep the conversation going.